how you doing? It's Colin Daniel here from riffninja.com. I'm in the mood to answer some more questions for my students, and this one is from Mick. He says he's got hung up on scales. He's bored. What do I do about my scales? Wow. Well, I've never been bored of a scale in my life. The only time I get bored of playing scales is when I have to sit there for hours with a metronome. That really improves your timing, but it doesn't do much for your creativity, really. You can see I've practiced this scale quite a bit that way. Yeah, it's good to do metronome scale practice in the conventional way, which is just ascending and descending, but there's lots of ways to break out. And here are a few suggestions to get you started, Mick. First thing is, depending on the level of theory you're at, say if you learned a riff. Like here's a good example, this blues riff. Well, really, that blues riff is part of the scale. So now you could treat that riff like a scale practice, not only to master your riff, but to get to know your guitar better and your timing. You could use a metronome or a drum machine track and decide on how many times you're going to play the riff and move it up. I'd play it once and move it up. You know, keep moving it up a fret at a time. When you get done with the 6th string root, try it in a 5th string root. So any riff you know, like this is just an example of a riff, any riff you know could be used. If you wanted to know what this riff is, I'm assuming you already know a little bit about scales, so you should have picked up on it, but if you didn't, it's the 1, the octave. So, you know, this is an A pentatonic minor. You see, once you learn the pattern, you don't have to know the key or even the notes. You have to move the pattern up and down, right? And that keeps things interesting too. So yeah, here I started it in an A position, 5th fret, 6th string. Then I cross over to the 4th string, and that's 7th fret. Down to the 4th string, 5th fret, cross over to the 5th string, 7th fret, and it's just double notes for each. Now I was playing it in a shuffle time, which is one long, one short. So practicing your scales with different timings is also interesting, but if you really want to break out of the boredom of scales where you're doing like, you know, there's a shuffle with the pentatonic scale. But it's still a scale, you know. So if you take a riff and you know where the riff came out of, it's just as good as practicing a scale. So here's this A pentatonic minor, famous blues riff. Now just move it up. You could play it 2 cycles or 3 cycles or whatever. I usually suggest even cycles, like 2s or 4s. I'll say 2s work really good for this one. Then move it up a semitone, like 1 fret. Play 2 and then move it up another semitone. So you can take a simple riff like that. I like to take things like in the pentatonic scale, play the upper octave of the pentatonic scale, right? Because really, how many riffs work off that? You know? So that's going from the highest note to the 1st octave. Okay, now move it up a semitone, 1 fret. Move it up another fret. Move it up another one. So you can separate your scales into different octaves because notice in the first riff, that's in the lower octave. Now the second riff, that's in the upper octave. In the diatonic minor scale, I like to take it 2 strings at a time because it's really interesting, especially the first 2 strings. In diatonic minor, and see all of this practice is just as good as traditionally going through a scale. Now this is diatonic minor, meaning the 7-note minor. And I've just taken the first 6th and 5th string, the first 2 strings out of the scale. I'm practicing my down-up picking, and I'm using distortion with it. Here's a good trick too. It'll develop some techniques. You go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. When you finish with the root again, you finish with that downstroke, right? Now you got to start the next one a fret higher on the upstroke. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So I'm going down, up, 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 down, up. So every time it changes, right? The first group starts on a downstroke, the second group starts on an upstroke, third group downstroke again, so you're alternating. You can take that pattern anywhere. Now that could be done with every group of 2 strings that you have with any one of your scales. With the pentatonic scale, it's not as interesting as it is with the diatonic because you have a few more notes to deal with in the diatonic. And this particular move I really like is the first 6 notes of the diatonic minor scale. So practicing with a clean sounding guitar and a raunchy sounding guitar also develop techniques because you have to develop your palm muting, your right hand technique. And I hope this has given you some insight into ways to making your scale practice a little less boring. Scales aren't boring, just the people playing them are. You have to learn to relate your riff to whatever riff you're playing. You have to relate it to a scale. Then you can take the riff and you start moving it up. You can intermix a scale with the riff too. That's yet another approach. But I hope this has given you some insight into that. And I'm going to leave you with that for right now. Get to work. We'll see you later. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my site if you like it, riffninja.com. That's where the real serious lessons happen. All right, take care.